Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for attending today's Nonprofit Resource Hub webinar. My name is David Goldstein. I'm the lead partner in the nonprofit practice group at the Sir Tillman Ballin Law Firm on Long Island. We are a proud founding member of the Nonprofit Resource Hub, or NRH for short. NRH is a trade association whose mission is to serve, be a resource to, educate, and connect its members to the nonprofit community. At the same time, NRH serves the nonprofit sector as a bridge connecting nonprofit organizations to each other and to helpful resources. And that's part of what we're doing here today. What do we at NRH do for nonprofits? We provide nonprofits with resources to help their organizations grow and thrive. We share a directory of our associate members. These are vetted, trusted providers and advisors who deliver quality products, services, and education to the nonprofit sector. We are continuously adding new associate members. Our associate members go through a rigorous vetting process to ensure the quality of their services. NRH hosts networking sessions and events to foster opportunities for collaboration, both with other nonprofit organizations and with experts serving the sector. We provide a continuous flow of information and insights to keep nonprofits informed about key issues affecting the sector and about helpful resources. We offer expert advice and consultation to help organizations effectively further their missions, and NRH serves as a one-stop resource hub for nonprofits, providing a single access point for information and resources. Nonprofit Resource Hub is itself a nonprofit. NRH's 5 founding members are represented on its board of directors. These 5 founding members are Sabrini and Associates Accountants, the Sir Tillman Ballin Law Firm, Nonprofit Sector Strategies, Triumph International Consultants, and Vanguard Insurance Agency. We encourage each of the nonprofits joining us for today's webinar to also join NRH as a nonprofit partner. There is no cost for nonprofits to join us as our nonprofit partners. There are significant benefits, including having your logo and mission added on our website with a link to your own website, adding your events to our calendar, and maximizing your organization's ability to benefit from the opportunities and resources that NRH offers. Before we turn things over to our presenters, I want to thank our associate members for their vital support in everything that we do. In the staffing arena, Gail Brendel, PNP Staffing. In payroll, Mike D'Onofrio, Premier Payroll. In fundraising event management, Darren Port, Powered by Professionals. In advertising, Noel Robb, 5-Star Advertising. Investment advisor, Matt Thompson of Morgan Stanley. In property casualty insurance, Michael Fleischer, Sterling Risk. In life insurance, Jim McTighe, Lee Nolan, and Koroghlian. You'll be hearing from him in a minute. In employment law, Doug Rowe, the Sir Tillman Ballin Law Firm. And in outsourced controller resources, Ellie Hume, your part-time controller. Now, without further ado, we're very pleased to introduce today's speakers, Jim McTighe and David Freitag of Lee Nolan and Koroghlian. And I turn it over to Jim and David. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everybody. As David mentioned, we work on the insurance side from a planning standpoint. And while we're talking about Social Security, we'll see as we go through the presentation how that can and is a fit. So Social Security has 2 components, disability and retirement. I'm going to focus on the retirement side today. And in the retirement arena, there are generally 2 types of plans, defined contribution plans and defined benefit plans. Defined contribution plan would be a 401k, 403b, where you know what you're contributing, but we do not know what the outcome is. Defined benefit plan is a plan where you know what the outcome is at a certain point in time at a later date. Many companies years ago had defined benefit plans. Most, an individual would work for one, maybe two companies, and when they retired, that income stream would be turned on for their lifetime through the defined benefit plan. In 1985, the top 100 companies, of the top 100 companies, 83 had defined benefit plans. In 2002, of the top 150 had defined benefit plans, and in 2017, only 6 of those companies had defined benefit plans. Social Security acts as a defined benefit plan. We know what it will be. It changes over time. It has changed over time. Rules, strategies, etc. Many times people will go to families, friends, colleagues for input and advice, but the information they receive, although well-intentioned, may be dated and not apply to them. So we're going to run through the history of Social Security, and then we're going to go through some sample cases a little bit later, and then open it up to questions, I think, along the way. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Freitag.
Well, thank you, Jim, and welcome everybody. I'm going to push some electronic buttons and see if we can make some screen sharing happen. And Jim, I'm going to want to make sure you can see this actual presentation on your screen. How does that look to you?
All good.
Okay. Well, we have a relatively small group together. Jim and I have worked many times with groups like this one, not specifically this group, but ones like it. And we hope that the information and time we spend together is going to be well worth it. I think it's a small enough organization on the phone today that we can take questions as we go along, or we'll make sure we provide for time at the end of the presentation to answer specific questions as well. I use this picture, by the way, because before COVID, I had ties in my closet. And now, of course, they don't get brought out very much. We've been detached and working from home since the middle of March. And I think the tie industry is one that's going to be under incredible pressure, as they say. But as Jim mentioned, what we want to do is, and I'm a bit of a history buff, turn the clock back. How did we get here? And then talk about today. What does Social Security represent today? What are some of the pressures that affect it? We want to talk about filing consideration, taxes. We're going to put things together. We are going to distribute a copy of these slides to you following the presentation in the form of a PDF file. But I would encourage you to take some notes along the way, a little call to action things to think about. And one of the things to think about, although this is a very confusing slide, is the part in red, which is the middle of the page. You know, when you file for Social Security benefits, you effectively push the button on a stopwatch, and that watch can run for a year. After that year has gone by, to make a change about a filing election for Social Security benefits becomes extremely difficult. And to compound the problem, if you want to make a change during that year, if you've been paid anything, you're going to have to pay all that back. So thankfully, we're having this presentation, and my real thanks go out to everybody on the call, because the more information you can collect about Social Security, the better prepared you're going to be to make a really important decision that fits into your plans for retirement in the future. So let's take that walk down memory lane together. Let's turn the clock back to the United States Capitol on August the 14th of 1935. And Jim, you've seen this picture before, but if you hadn't seen this picture, would there be anything that would jump off the screen at you and say, Dave, I want to ask you a question? And if it did, what would that question be?
That would be, who is the woman in the picture?
Yeah, you can notice we got a lot of gentlemen here. One is kind of interesting, smoking a cigar inside of a public building. I mean, that's kind of weird. But at the end of the day, that woman is Frances Perkins. And I like to talk about Frances Perkins for lots of different reasons. By the way, Jim, can you see the black bar across the top of your screen, or is that transparent to everybody?
Secretary of Labor?
No, the black participants number remote control thing.
No.
Okay, good. So let's talk about Frances Perkins. Francis Perkins knew FDR when he was the governor of the state of New York. And he was so impressed with her thinking and thoughts about the future that he appointed her to be his Secretary of Labor, first woman to be appointed as Secretary of Labor in the history of the country. She held the job longer than anybody else. And the reason she's in that picture is that Frances Perkins and the people that worked for her on that particular committee wrote the law. But you know, even though that was an incredible accomplishment, and we have a lot to be grateful for the fact that she created this this opportunity and part of the New Deal, Frances Perkins did a lot more than that. And one of them was establish unemployment compensation. So think about this for a second. Here we are in 2021, in the middle of a raging pandemic, the likes of which I have never experienced before. And think about the importance of unemployment to millions of people in this country. And those concepts can be traced back to Frances Perkins. Workmen's compensation, the minimum wage, the abolishment of child labor. This was a visionary thinker that almost nobody's ever heard about. So I want everybody to understand that we stand on the shoulders of a real titan in American history. And if you visited Washington, D.C. sometime in the future and you're strolling down Constitution Avenue, you would come to the Department of Labor building. And the Department of Labor building is now called the Frances Perkins Building. It's got a terrific museum, and you can go through and find out some of the legacy that she has given to us. So Frances Perkins started this program back there in 1935, and they enrolled people into the program. Postal carriers, interestingly enough, found folks and they enrolled them into the program. And by 1937, they were beginning to distribute back to the people who had contributed benefits. And our good friend Ernest Ackerman here, who is a railroad streetcar conductor in Cleveland, Ohio, has been pointed out as the first person to receive a lump sum benefit. Now let's talk a little bit about that lump sum benefit, because clearly that is going to enter a kind of a debatable philosophy about how to pay these benefits. If you're going to pay a benefit one time, that's going to last you for the rest of your life, how much did Ernest receive? Now again, Jim, I know you knew the answers to this, but if you had to pick it and you didn't know, would you have guessed $95 as a lump sum payment for the rest of his life? Would you have guessed $19, $8, or 17 cents? What do you think?
19.
You would have guessed 19. Well, you'd have been a little high. And it was 17 cents, and that's because Ernest effectively retired shortly after the whole thing started. He hadn't paid much, 5 cents in payroll taxes on $5 of earnings, and that generated a lump sum benefit of 17 cents. To put that in perspective, down at the local post office, you could amble in and pick up a first-class stamp for 3 cents. But clearly, by design, the monthly benefit checks the annual checks were never going to really work. Not annual, but one time for the rest of your life. So they converted the system to an annuity type program where you get a check every month. And the first annuitant was our good friend Ida Mae Fuller in nearby Ludlow, Vermont. And her check each month, in relationship to what we paid in, is a fascinating story. So in total FICA payroll taxes, Ida Mae paid in $24.75, which generated a monthly benefit for Ida Mae of $22.50. And I like to remind everybody that there's a magic driver that affects a filing decision about Social Security. And that's what Ida Mae taught us, because Ida Mae lived until she was 100 years of age. Longevity is one of the key levers in making a good decision about a Social Security filing election. And in Ida Mae's case, it worked out well. She collected over $22,000 in benefits. And if you went down to the local Chevy dealer in nearby Ludlow, Vermont for $800, 1940, you could pick up a ride that looks something like that. But that was yesterday, and today is today, and the system has evolved over time. And now we have an amazing story to tell about the success of this program. Remember that Social Security is 3 programs wrapped into one. It provides a survivorship program. In fact, Jim, we've talked about it. Is a newborn baby able to collect a Social Security check?
Absolutely.
And because one of the parents
Survivor
could,
benefit.
yeah, benefits, there's a survivor benefit. It could be that one of the parents died. That's a possibility. So remember, you don't have to be at retirement age to collect Social Security. There are 6 million people in this country today, and these numbers go through the end of 2019. And we get these updated in the middle of 2021 for the year 2020. But we have 6 million people at the end of 2019 collecting survivor benefits. Layered on top of that are 10 million people collecting disability checks. But by far the biggest component of the program are the retirees and the dependents of those retirees. If you add those three components under this payroll tax umbrella of Social Security, you're now at 64 million people currently today receiving checks. And if you added each one of those checks up each month, the total would be 88.25 billion, or a little north of that number today. And that's a month. And if you took that number and multiplied it times 12, you would be north of $1 trillion. Social Security represents the biggest single program in the federal system. In fact, if you combine in Social Security with Medicare, you're talking about half of the entire federal budget. So this is really the elephant in the room, and it gets its money not from income tax, but from something called a payroll tax, FICA taxes. And these FICA taxes have some unique features. Let's talk a little bit about those FICA taxes. You're currently paying 6.2% of your income into the Social Security system for those three benefits: retirement, disability, and survivorship. That's matched by your employer, 6.2%. If you're self-employed, guess what? You get to pay both sides of that tax. And that tax for the Social Security component continues up to something called the wage base. Now, Jim, can you see this, my mouse on the screen pointing
Yes.
at that number?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 142,800. That number is indexing. This was just announced. This is the number effective for 2021. When you make more than 142,800, those Social Security taxes stop. You don't pay anymore after that. But in addition to the Social Security taxes under this FICA umbrella, we're also picking up Medicare taxes, 1.45% of your income, again matched by the employer, 1.45. Self-employed pay both sides just like they do on the Social Security side. But there's one huge difference between the Medicare tax and the Social Security tax, and that is there is no cap on the Medicare tax. You pay it on everything that you make. So that creates this avalanche of income that comes in to the Social Security system. And Jim, I just want to make sure you can't see this black band at the top of your screen.
No.
I'm moving. You can't see that, right?
No.
Okay, good. So let's just take a quick look at this tidal wave of money that's flowing into the Social Security system from these payroll taxes. And in 2019, $1.062 trillion came into the system through that revenue collection methodology. We paid out at the very same time in 2019, $1.059 trillion. So in one way, money comes into the left pocket, it immediately goes into the right pocket. It comes in from the workers, it goes out to the beneficiaries of the system. And we've been collecting more money coming into the system since 1983. And maybe even prior to that. But in 1980, 1981, there was severe financial stress associated with the Social Security system. And Ronald Reagan was president, Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House. They got together. They knew that Social Security was an incredibly popular program and said, we got to fix this. So they ambled up 16th Street to a little known consultant, first name Allen, last name Greenspan, and gave him a job and said, Allen, we want you to run this bipartisan commission to figure out how we're going to take care of Social Security into the future. And one of the things that resulted from that was setting premiums, these payroll tax rates, that would collect more money than they needed. Because they knew, based on demographics, that those baby boomers, all the folks that went to Woodstock, one of these days would hold up their hand in the future and start collecting these retirement benefits or survivorship benefits or disability benefits. And they took that surplus money and they put it into something called the Social Security Trust Fund. Now, the way this works mechanically is that the IRS collects the payroll taxes. They give them over to the Social Security system. But the Social Security system isn't a bank. So what they do is they give that money over to the Treasury. And the Treasury creates a special bond. And that special bond is an interest-bearing bond, callable at face amount. You can't buy it. I can't buy it. It's only sold to it's only available to Social Security Administration. And that bond then is holding these reserves. And the Social Security Trust Fund at the end of 2019 had close to $3 trillion in that reserve, $2,897 billion as an example. And think about that avalanche of money that's sitting there, these bonds that are holding these values, 178 million people contributing into the system. Everything was working great as they had planned. And then all of a sudden we arrive at 2020, last year. And that's when we started calling the bonds. Some of that surplus trillions of dollars began to be used to pay the promised benefits to the folks who were paying into the system. So now, Jim, you're really good at what you do, but I want to offer you a new job opportunity. You ready for this?
Yes.
Okay. Let's suppose you decide to run for Congress, and you're really good at that. And everybody loves you in Washington, D.C., and you're so popular that you now ascend to the speakership of the House of Representatives. And as the Speaker of the House, in the year 2033, maybe 2034, maybe 2035, one of those years, one of your jobs is going to be to stand in front of now north of 70 million people who are taking benefits from Social Security and announce that there's going to be an across-the-board benefit cut of 21%. Jim, do you want that job?
Thank you.
I don't know if David can hear us on this phone call or not. I don't think David wants it. I don't want it. I don't know anybody that wants that job, because this is a super important part of everyone's future. So Jim, as a visionary leader, typically what a good Speaker of the House would do is you would appoint, as Reagan and Tip O'Neill did, a bipartisan commission. And typically it would come out of the House Ways and Means Committee, and you would begin to look at funding to perpetuate this system for the next 75 years. And there's really only two basic things you can look at to fix the issue of the shortfall. Remember that earnings cap, Jim, that we talked about? Is there anything magic about that number?
Raise it.
I think raise it might be a good answer. In fact, we've run many focus groups in Boston when we pointed out to people this point about the revenue cap. And that's, everybody says, well, why don't we just raise the revenue cap? Wouldn't that make some sense? Prior to the pandemic of last year starting, the House Ways and Means Committee actually had legislation marking up that would continue the Social Security system into the year 2100. And one of the top things on the list was the increase of that revenue cap with a donut hole type of philosophy that would isolate people that were between the current revenue cap and 400,000 of income, basically shifting new contributions to higher income people. So that's on the table. Would that make some sense, Jim, to do that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it would make some sense. How about that 6.2% contribution rate? Would we want to take a look at that, Jim?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, what's so magic about that? Maybe it's 6.3, maybe it's 6.4. But by moving these little targets on the revenue side, that's going to go a long way to eliminate that difficult discussion, Jim, that you've got in 2033 about benefit cuts. But you can't just look at the revenue side. You have to look at the benefit side. When my father started receiving benefits from Social Security, the maximum full retirement age was 65. Mine happens to be 66. We've got several folks on this call that I would wager their maximum full retirement age is going to be 67. Because if you were born after 1960, your full retirement age is going to be 67. And we're in the middle of a transition time where those retirement ages are gradually moving up. And right now we're in the middle of that. I want to talk about that specifically, but that would be an idea. My son, I have a 47-year-old son in San Francisco. If I whispered into his ear that we're raising his full retirement age to 68 or 69, it wouldn't be the end of life, just like my retirement age went from 65 to 66. So those things are on the table. And I think you can make this blanket statement that Social Security is going to come under some structural changes, but it would be very difficult if it just went away. That would create an enormous amount of poverty in this country. So we think those things are coming. And Jim, as the Speaker of the House, I think you're up to the task. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Now let's go into some of the basics. You ready for some of these basics?
Yep.
How do you get into the system? You get into the system by earning a credit. In 2021, you make $14,070. You've earned a credit. You can only earn 4 credits in 1 year. And if you make $5,880, whether you make it in one check or over the course of the year, you've earned your 4 credits. Can't make any more than that. That's part of the brilliance. This is qualifying for the club. You can earn 10 years. It takes 10 years to earn these credits. You have to have 40 to be in the club. But part of the brilliance, I think, of the Social Security system and the way it evolved is that the number of credits that you have means absolutely nothing relative to the amount that you're paid. There's a relationship between how much you paid in and how much you take out. And if you want to take a note, and this is an important note, a little yellow pad there next to your desk, 35 years. It's the highest 35 years of your working history that determines what your Social Security benefit's going to be for the rest of your life. Not consecutive, highest over the 35-year working time. So you can start and stop, come back, come forward, make more now than you made later. On average, those 35 years are added up. They're indexed into today's dollars. They're subject to some formulas, and that determines the size of your check. Importance in calculating the size of your check is the understanding of full retirement age and something called the PIA. These are definitional terms. At full retirement age, you receive 100% of your benefit. If you took benefits prior to that, they're going to be reduced, as you'll see in a second. If you take it after that, they're going to be increased. But the term that defines the benefit is called PIA, Primary Insurance Amount. It's a little acronym. At your FRA, you get 100% of your PIA. And we're in the middle of flux right now, a change in that definitional term of full retirement age. So here's Dave, born between 43 and 54. Dave's full retirement age is 66. If you were born after 1966 or later, your full retirement age is 67. But if you were born between 1955 and
1960 or later. Yeah.
1960, I'm sorry, yeah, make sure I'm getting ahead of myself here. So if you were born 1960 or later, if you were born between 55 and 1959, those years, your Social Security birth date and your calendar year birth date are different. So let's take a look at Mary as an example. If Mary was born in January of 1958, that's her calendar year birth date, but her Social Security birth date is going to be in August of that particular year. So understanding your full retirement age, make a note of that because it's really important to determine a filing decision based on your full retirement age. Now, how you get money from the system is affected by 4 different things. It's affected by when you start, how much money did you pay in, your marital status, and what did Ida Mae Fuller teach us way back there in Ludlow, Vermont? Definitely driven by longevity. Probably the biggest driver in determining how much you're going to get from the system is going to be longevity. Nobody really knows the answers, but we got some suggestions for you. We do know that up to 69% of the people take their benefits on or before their full retirement age. And let's now put this into an example. Let's take our friend Mary. Let's assume her full retirement age is 66 and 6 months. And her FRA, full retirement amount is $1,000 a month. Now, if Mary decided to take her benefits early, prior to her full retirement age, let's say in this case 62, she's not going to get $1,000. She's going to have an actuarial reduction applied to that payment. And actuaries are all over the Social Security Administration rules. There is going to be an actuarial adjustment reducing Mary's benefit to $725. Why? Because she's collecting it for a longer period of time. Now, the flip side of that is, well, what if you went past your full retirement age? What does that do? Then you earn something called a delayed retirement credit. And the simple math on the delayed retirement credit is 8% per year. Simple interest between the start of your full retirement age and your age 70. So in Mary's case, if she decided, well, I'd like to start my benefit at 70, she's going to get $1,280 a month, not $725 if she started at 62. And the delta between those two extremes is 76%, totally controlled by, in this case, the worker, on when they start taking their benefits. So Jim, if you look at this chart, who are the people who would be attracted to taking benefits early?
People with a shortened lifespan, maybe single people, people who need the money.
Yeah, and let's talk about that last one, because that's really important. In 2008, 2009, in the middle of the huge Great Recession, we saw amazing increases in people taking Social Security because it was a financial lifeline into their lifestyle. We were not going to see the numbers just yet, but we're going to see the numbers for 2020 and coming into 2021. People between 62 and 66, their full retirement age, may be looking at Social Security as a supplement to folks who have been on furlough, whose jobs were eliminated, whose companies had disappeared because of the pandemic. Financial need is a really important reason to take benefits early, and everybody should understand that this golden financial net is sitting down underneath people that they can tap into if they need it. So that's one important one. Jim, you mentioned another one. You want to go back to one of those other points as well? We want to talk about that.
Shortened life expectancy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Longevity. If you're not going to have a long life expectancy, then taking benefits from Social Security makes a lot of sense. There is one rule. You have to be here to collect those benefits. You cannot collect them if you're not here. On the flip side, let's go to age 70 as an example. What kind of folks would be attracted to that, do you think?
People who don't need the money, people who have who are healthy.
Yeah. So if you've got long longevity in your life, in your family history, in your DNA, deferring might make some sense if you think you're going to get past your full retirement age. And if you've got the bridges and the wherewithal to defer it, those would be reasons to think about doing that. Well, how much do you defer? How much do you think about? It can easily be estimated and reported to you by using ssa.gov. This is a fabulous website. ssa.gov/retire/estimator. In 3 or 4 minutes, if you simply put in your Social Security number, your mother's maiden name, birth date, you'll get an instant printout. But that's not exactly the best way to find out how much you're going to receive from Social Security. The best way to do that is to have a My account. You actually create your own web portal into the Social Security database. Pretty easy to do. And if you have that portal in existence, you can then generate something called the green line form. That's my definition for the full Social Security statement. Jim, do you remember getting these mailed to you?
Yes.
Yeah, many of you on the call remember these used to come in the mail around your birth date.
Yeah.
Well, they stopped doing that if you're under age 60. So the only way now to get a copy of this form is you have to have the portal activated and you have to be able to go in and download that PDF file. And in that green line form, you're going to see projections Much like Jim just talked about when we started, this is a defined benefit program. You're going to define the benefit, $1,827 a month, starting year age 67, $1,271 if you start at 62. If you go at age 70, it's going to be $2,266 for this particular individual. There's really helpful information here on this, and you can use it as a target. But there are other reasons why you need access to your earnings record, which is page 3 of the Green Line form, and that's going to roll up in the middle column and tell you how much is being reported as earnings. It's pretty important because you're going to see every year's contributions into the Social Security system reported back to you on the Green Line form. Is it possible, Jim, over a 35-year working period, that there might be an error in this report?
Most definitely.
Yeah, in working with clients, have you had clients experience this?
Yes.
Yeah, at times. If we're doing a meeting and we've got 13 people on this call, I bet 1 or 2 of you have maybe found an error in your Social Security earnings history. Jim, if the error is made, is it in the government's favor or your favor?
Usually in their favor.
Usually in the government's favor. That's exactly right. And you have 3 years, 3 months, and 15 days to fix it. If you don't fix it, then you're going to have to live with it forever. And there's a good time in your life to be checking these earnings history. Jim, what are a couple times when you should be checking this earnings history?
On your birthday or when you get the form.
Yeah, when you get the form and you download it. How about when you file your taxes,
Sure.
birth date? All would be good times to check those earnings. And if there's a discrepancy, they're very willing to fix it. But you have to initiate the action. They're not going to call you up and say, oh, by the way, Jim, it looks like you might have had a change here. Can you call us and talk about it? Social Security Administration does not call you. You have to call them. But there's yet another reason to have your Social Security My Account. And Jim, we've done this before. Are you ready for a quick role play here?
Let's do it.
Okay. So there you are. You've got your iPhone in your hand. And I know you live with it because I get messages from you all the time on that. And there's a little voicemail, and the voicemail sounds something like this. Jim, this is David Freitag calling from the Social Security Administration in Washington, D.C. I regret to inform you there's been unusual and suspicious activity with your Social Security number in the state of Texas. You could be subject to a fraud investigation. I urge you to immediately call this 800 number, 800-237-1456, to resolve this situation. Thank you. Jim, have you had calls like that?
Yes, on several occasions.
And what do you do if you get a call like that?
Yeah, usually hang up and ignore them.
Always.
Always, correct.
This is a national scam. And the Social Security Administration knows about it. And they're working hand in hand with other organizations in addition to the AARP to slam the scam. If you have a username and password on a My Account in front of your Social Security records, that provides an additional layer of security for your records with the Social Security Administration. In fact, they've now gone to something called two-factor authentication, which I think everybody on this call is starting to get used to. When you log into the website, you get a little text message on your phone, and you have to put the special number back in to make sure it's you that you're talking to. So what to do from today forward? A, if you don't have a Social Security My Account, you need to get one. B, if you get one of these calls, don't answer. Set them up as quickly as you can. All right. Longevity and the wild card. Let's talk a little bit about that one. Nobody really knows what that's going to be, but as Ida Mae Fuller taught us, that's something you really need to consider. And if you go to socialsecurity.gov, they actually have a very generic longevity calculator on that site. You can see the link down at the bottom, ssa.gov, OATC, population longevity, HTML. Pretty much follow that link. Again, we're sending copies of these slides, so you don't have to write it down today, but you can clearly find it when you go to ssa.gov. And you put in 2 things, your sex and your birthday. How accurate is that going to be, Jim?
Should be. To his point, but then who knows what the X factor is, which is your health.
Yeah, it's going to be applying law of large numbers to you, and that never works, to be very specific. We have to look at you, your unique DNA, your family DNA. What about how long your mother and father lived? What about aunts and uncles? What about your lifestyle, medical history, those kinds of things? Those will all play a factor in determining life expectancy. You know, the assumed life expectancy for a male in his 60s with the Social Security system, let's say it's 65, is about 83. For women, it's about 85. A married couple, though, in their mid 60s, highly likely, not on an individual level, but you look at both of them together, they have a high life expectancy of one of them getting into their 90s. So everybody's got to look at that, and you got to get your arms around it. There's lots of calculators on the internet that can help you with this, but this is one that exists at the Social Security Administration as a good kicking off starting point. Now, filing strategies. All right, so those are some of the basics. Well, let's take a look. People really fall into three categories here. There's young people, there's people approaching retirement, and they're fossils like me who are born before January the 1st of 1954. So let's take a look at Sam and Lee, a young couple. And when we do modeling, we drop numbers into financial planning software. This is a picture of the software tool that we happen to use, Jim and I together, and we need to find out a few things to make this modeling system work. We need to know the benefits, those FRA, full retirement age benefits, projected for Sam and for Lee. And we go and we find out and we get that answer. We then make an assumption about life expectancy. Then we then layer in some assumptions about cost of living increases over time. And then that creates this sort of bewildering graphic. Jim, do you remember what we call this bewildering graphic?
What are we calling it, Dave?
We're calling it the Social Security shopping mall
There you go.
because it represents different opportunities for you to take Social Security. Sam's got 9 choices, 62 to 70. Lee's got 9 choices. That's 81 stores in this shopping mall. And you can visit the stores and say, well, if I started at 70 and 70, what would I receive? If I started at 62 and 62, what I would receive? And we can get some math calculations and see. And you notice down at the bottom at the spread between these two filing scenarios is really enormous. If you started at 62, the payout is at $1.6 million. If you started at 70, Sam and Lee, we're looking over $2 million if they lived to those life expectancies. That's a delta that approaches $500,000, totally driven by when you start. And you might just say, well, Dave, wouldn't it make some sense to start at full retirement age? Isn't that the best thing to do? Well, maybe, could be, but not necessarily. Because if you started at full retirement age, the payout would be $1.9 million. If you waited to 70, it's a little over $2 million. That's $185,000 delta. So everybody is going to want to visit this Social Security shopping mall and see what is the best age combination for them to do and for them to follow.
Dave, can
Well,
you talk about the, just spend a minute on the cost of living adjustment?
sure. What would you like to know about it?
Just go into it in a little more detail.
Yeah, cost of living adjustment is established by congressional legislation. It's not voted on by Congress each year, thankfully. It's based on the Department of Labor analysis of the cost of living, the CPI index, the W Urban Index for people in this country, and it's adjusted every year. This year is going to be 1.3%. Last year, 1.6. Prior to that was higher. Some years it's 0. But the good news is that this can cause the Social Security benefits to go up. It can never cause them to go down. If cost of living was negative, as an example, it's not going to reduce your Social Security benefit. It will absolutely increase it. On average, over the last many years, the adjustment's been north of 2% on average. However, from a planning perspective, we've been running numbers at the 1 to 1.5% just to be conservative. Did that help, Jim?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. All right, so younger people need to know that if they're going to get the maximum from Social Security, starting early may not be the way to do that. And for them to defer Social Security, they need to be thinking about having bridges in place, financial bridges in place, and one of those might be working longer that would allow them to defer taking the money. Now, older couples, and I happen to be one of those, and by definition, born before January the 1st of 1954. So let me just introduce Bob and Mary to you. Bob's benefit $2,400, Mary's benefit $1,100. Bob's longevity to 85, Mary to 90 of the same cost of living. They could, in fact, at full retirement age have done something called a restricted filing. Now, what in the world is that? That's when Mary would start her benefit. Now, the only increase that Mary's going to receive would be because of those cost of living benefits Jim and I just talked about. But at the very same time she's receiving her own benefits from her own work history, she opens a magic window for Bob with that restricted application. And that allows Bob to then take a spousal benefit from Mary, but at the very same time earn delayed retirement credits on her own record, which then at age 70 could give him up to a 32% increase. And the math on this is pretty compelling. And these are numbers based at the end of last year. They're a little bit different for this year. But let's take a look at Bob and Mary. If they did this particular restricted filing strategy, they could, as a married couple, be taking $1,600, maybe almost $1,700 as a combined benefit, partly coming from Mary's work record and part for Bob's spousal benefit. But now, those delayed retirement credits, that's when the magic happens. And Bob's benefit at age 70 earned those delayed retirement credits. His benefit went from $2,500 to $3,584 a month with a little inflation built in. And combined, they're now looking at approximately $5,000 a month. So Jim, if I walked into your office today and I'm 70 years of age, I said, gee, Jim, I'd like to buy this guaranteed cash flow for the rest of my life, adjusted for cost of living, 2% per year. Would I have to write you a big check to get that?
Definitely. And I also want to point out that Mary's benefit went from 1128 to 1358 because of the cost of living.
And a spousal adjustment there as well.
Yeah.
But would I have to write you a big check?
Absolutely.
How big a check?
I'm not sure.
Well, north of $1 million.
Absolutely.
Well, north of $1 million. In fact, in today's interest rates, north of $1.3 million. So as Jim said, it's a big check. It's going to be a big check. And many people don't realize that this Social Security program they've been paying into for 35 years is turning out to be $1 million or plus asset. And if I walked into your house today and dropped a suitcase on the coffee table, it had $1.3 million in cash, you wouldn't make a casual decision about what to do with it. At least I wouldn't do that. And I don't think anybody else should either. So again, so thankfully you're on this call because you've got the ability to make educated decisions about what to do and how to do it. Now, Jim, let's look into the future. Here's Bob and Mary before something happens. They're doing fine. They're getting almost $7,000 a month. And one day Bob dies. The very next day, Mary's household income falls from $69.93 to $51.91 just from Social Security. So Jim, what's the probability that this is going to happen?
100%.
100%. 100% certain. Everybody needs to understand that when somebody dies, one of these checks is going to stop. Yet when we did a national study and polled over 1,500 people, a substantial numbers of the 1,500 said, oh, I guess they just continue. No problem. They don't. There's going to be a reduction in benefits. And that reduction in benefits
Dave, I just want to reference from a planning standpoint, most folks are living on the dollars that are coming in monthly. And so with that reduction, it's going to impact their ability to pay their bills.
Sure.
So that's where the life insurance component comes in and needs to be planned, just as the Social Security needs to be planned and addressed at an earlier age.
Absolutely. You can do defensive planning strategy and you can do it over here. The problem is at 85 is too late. And whether it's life insurance, annuities, investment accounts, planning is called for. If you knew of an event that's going to be 100% certain, wouldn't it make sense to plan for it and know that it's coming? And I think it does. And lots of folks, again, have that big aha moment. They go, oh, okay, maybe we need to do some planning and talk about that. Now, interestingly enough, it could be that Bob and Mary in this case said, no, we're going to take benefits early. They went to the family picnic. Uncle Bob said this is what he would do, maybe what he did. Didn't really look at the unique situation of this couple. And if they took the benefits early, you're going to get that reduction for early filing. Take a look at this number at age 70, 3,800 versus almost 5,000. But the one to really look for here is the survivor benefit for Mary. Remember in the other example, it was over 5,000 for Mary. Now it's 3,600. And there is a huge difference in lifestyle between 5,000 and 3,600 because these dollars are lifestyle dollars. They pay for the roof to get fixed, for the water heater that blew up, for the floor that needs to be replaced, or trips to grandchildren, or gifts, or simply, checks to Instacart or Netflix. These are important changes, and people need to understand the impact of what happens if you took benefits early. Now, not all marriages last forever. In this particular case, let's suppose there's a divorce involved, and there's a couple check boxes to think about people who've been divorced. A, if you've been married for 10 years, if you've been divorced at least 2. If you were born before January the 1st of 54, you actually can do restricted filing, like Nancy here. Let's take Nancy. Nancy could, in fact, take benefits because she born before January the 1st of 54 from her ex-husband, Alan. But at the very same time, collect benefits on her own record that would give her a potential increase of up to 32% at her age 70. The dynamics on this mathematically are pretty staggering. If she set it at 65 versus doing this restricted filing strategy, it could create over $170,000 more over her lifetime, just because she was smart about how to take the benefits. And sadly, this is a commentation. This is a comment about COVID and the times we live in. Talking about widow and widower benefits in the past didn't come up all that much, but we've lost more than 350,000 just since last March. And these questions are now coming up a lot. There are very specific benefits for survivors. And if we took Kathy at this point, one of the things she might want to do is collect a survivor benefit from the husband that she lost. Take his check, but at the very same time on her own check, earn those great delayed retirement credits, so at age 70, she could switch from the survivor benefit to her own benefit and get an up to 32% increase for the rest of her life. So that's going to come up. And Jim, I know you know a lot. By the way, the difference in payout, again, using our modeling tool, could approach $100,000, just being smart about how to take these particular benefits. But Jim, you work with single clients. Is there a big challenge for single clients in taking benefits?
Yeah, most definitely, especially during these times.
Yeah, in these times. And it has to do with longevity and financial need. So here's a good picture of Michelle. If Michelle started them at 62, it's $1,800 a month. She waited to full retirement age, 26, went to age 70, 39. And again, driven by lifestyle, could produce huge differences in payout, which means you probably need a little help figuring out what the choices would be. I was on a call this morning with a very successful CPA. We were doing his own unique case. And we were able to look these things in perspective and make a decision that worked for them. It's all going to be uniquely specific to you.
Dave, just as an FYI, we're about a couple of minutes from the finish line here.
Okay, good. Well, same-sex couples, there's an opportunity for same-sex couples. They picked up 2 huge benefits. I want to refer you to the handout that we'll give you. And there's a couple of additional considerations to keep in mind. One is the earnings test. If you're working before your full retirement age, these are hurdles that are put in your way. If you exceed this number, 18,960, there's a 2-for-1 reduction. The same thing applies to your full retirement age. The hurdle is a little higher. That can be a problem. One rule that I make for everybody is if you're going to be working, taking benefits early from Social Security doesn't make some sense. And we can thank that bipartisan commission for income taxation. 1983, they started this up. The thing to remember about Social Security benefits, they're tax-favored benefits. You're all in the state of New York, or most people are. You don't pay Social Security income tax in the state of New York, which means they buy more dollars. So let's put it all together. And Jim, thanks for the reminder. Let's sum this up. It's not always about the money. It's not about when you stop working. It's really about your unique situation. And we can stop right here and say that one size fits one. You really need to fine-tune your filing strategy based on your unique needs. It's not a dress that fits everybody or a shirt that fits every day. This is tailored, handmade decisions that apply just to you. So let's just stop here and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, David.
Well, maybe, Jim, we put everybody to sleep. Maybe we.
Takeaways are to pay attention to it ahead of time and do planning as you would with anything else, because it's something you should do, but you're not made to do. And if you don't, the decision gets made for you.
Sure.
It's not always in your best interest.
Well, that's a great takeaway. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to provide a PDF copy of the slides. We're going to send you something called the client guide that might be great for you to take a look at. David, do you have any closing comments to offer?
Sure, happy to take it. It's David again, and I'm one of the Nonprofit Resource Hub board members. I want to thank Dave and Jim for a wonderful job. Thank you so much for the detail and the presentation. It was extremely helpful, and we're looking forward to receiving your materials by email. And I want to thank each of you for attending our webinar. And everyone's going to be getting a survey. Please fill that out and return it to us. It helps us understand how best to satisfy and meet everyone's needs. We encourage you to visit our website, nonprofitresourcehub.org. It's got some awesome resources. There are archived webinars available on demand. There are lots of articles there. And of course, there's information on how to become a nonprofit partner, which we spoke about earlier. We encourage all of you to stay in touch. We look forward to seeing you at future webinars and Nonprofit Resource Hub events. And everyone, please stay safe and healthy and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.